Fellow Nigerians, it is exactly 3 decades today that Nigerians went to the polls to exercise their inalienable right to elect a president of their choice to lead the transition from military dictatorship to a representative government of the people. The abortion by the military fiat of the decisive victory of Chief MKO Abiola of the defunct Social Democratic Party in the June 12, 1993 presidential election, up to that time, the fairest and the freest election in the country's political evolution, turned out, ironically, to be the seed that germinated into the prolonged struggle that gave birth to the democracy we currently enjoyed since 1999. In rising to strongly oppose the arbitrary annulment of the will of the majority of Nigerians, as expressed in that historic election, the substantial number of our people who participated in the struggle to annul the election signified their fierce commitment to enthroning democracy as a form of government that best ennobles the liberty, the dignity of individual, and integrity, as well as the stability of the polity. The fierce opposition to the annulment of June 12, 1993 presidential election and unrelenting pro-democracy onslaught it unleashed was the equivalent of the battle against colonial rule by our founding fathers that resulted in the gaining of Nigerian independence in 1960. Just like the anti-colonial movement, the pro-democracy June 12 vanguard demonstrated once again the enduring validity of the 19th century historian Arnold Toynbee's eternal postulation that civilization and society experience progress as they are forced to respond to challenges posed by the environment. The unjust annulment of a widely acknowledged free and fair election was a challenge that elicited resistance by a resurgent civil society, leading ultimately to the attainment of our second independence, as exemplified by the return of democratic governance in 1999. Fellow compatriots, we celebrate a day that has remained a watershed in our nation's history, not just today, but for every June 12, for the endless future that our beloved country shall exist and work stronger and stronger. Generation of Nigerians will always remember themselves that the democracy that is steadily going to become the defining essence of our polity was not gifted to us on a silver platter. We can easily recall the sacrifice and the martyrdom of Chief MKO Abiola, the custodian of the sacred mandate that was so cruelly annulled. He sacrificed his life in unyielding patriotic defense of the ideals of democracy, as symbolized in his choice by his fellow countrymen and women as their duly elected president. There was an easier choice for him. It was to forgo the justice of his cause and opt for the path of ease and capitulation in the face of the tyranny of power. To his eternal credit and immortal glory? Abiola said no. He demonstrated the time-tested eternal truth that there are certain ideals and principles that are far more valuable than life itself. Every day on this day, down the ages, we will recall the several heroes of democracy, such as Kudirat Abiola, wife of Chief Abiola, who was brutally murdered while in the trenches fighting on the side of the people. We remember Pat Alfred Rwani, one of the heroes of our independence struggle, and Major General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, retired, who was silenced by the military junta while in pursuit of democracy. They gave their yesterday for the liberty that is ours today. The point is that we must never take this democracy for granted. We must forever jealously guard and protect it like a precious jewel. For a people can never truly appreciate the freedom and the right democracy guarantees them until they lose it. We have transferred the dark, thorny part of dictatorship before, and those who experience it can readily testify to the unbridgeable gap between the dignity of freedom and the humiliation and degradation of tyranny. True, yes, rancorous debates, interminable wrangling, ceaseless quarrels, bitter electoral contestations may be perceived by some as the unattractive feature of democracy, but they also testify to its merits and value. This year, we held the 7th in the cycle of elections that have become sacred ritual of our democratic practice in this dispensation since 1999. That the polls were intensely contested is in itself positive evidence that democracy is well and alive in our land. It is only natural that even as those who won and experienced victory in various elections are elated and fulfilled, those who lost are disenchanted and disappointed. But the beauty of democracy is that those who win today can lose tomorrow, and those who lose today will have an opportunity to compete and win in the next rounds of elections. Those who cannot endure and accept the pains of defeat in elections do not deserve the joy of victory when it is their turn to triumph. Above all, those who disagree with the outcome of the elections are taking full advantage of the constitutional provisions to seek redress in court. That is one of the reasons why democracy is the best form of government invented by man. For Chief MKO Abiola, the symbol of this day, in whose memory June 12 became a national holiday, democracy is eternal. It is about rule of law and vibrant judiciary that can be trusted to deliver justice and strengthen institutions. It has become imperative to state here that the unnecessary illegal orders issued to truncate or abridge democracy will no longer be tolerated. The recent harmonization of the retirement age of the judicial officers is meant to strengthen the rule of law, which is a critical pillar of democracy. The reform has just started, The democracy that will yield right dividends to the people who are shareholders means more than just freedom of choice and right to get people into elective offices. It means social and economic justice for our people. To the winner of June 12 democracy offers the best chance to fight and eliminate poverty. 30 years ago, he christened his campaign manifesto "Farewell to Poverty," because he was convinced that there is nothing defined about poverty. It is a man-made problem that can be eliminated with clearly thought out social and economic policies. It is for this reason that in my inauguration address on May 29, I gave effect to the decision taken by my predecessor in office to remove the fuel subsidy, the albatross, and free up the collective use of much needed resources, which had hitherto been pocketed by a few rich. I admit the decision will impose extra burden on the masses of our people. I feel your pain. This is one decision we must bear to save our country from going under and take our resources away from the stranglehold of a few unpatriotic elements. Painfully, I have asked you, my compatriots, to sacrifice a little more for the survival of our country. For your trust and belief in us, I assure you that your sacrifice shall not be in vain. The government I lead will repay you through massive investment in transportation, infrastructure, education, regular power supply, healthcare, and other public utilities that will improve the quality of lives. The democracy MK Abiola died for is one that promotes the welfare of the people over personal interests of the ruling class, and one where the governed can find personal fulfillment and happiness. That is the hope MK Abiola ignited throughout our country in 1993. On this year's Democracy Day, I enjoy all of us, to rededicate ourselves to strengthening this form of government of free people that has been our guiding light these past 24 years. In particular, those of us who have been privileged to elect into public office at various levels in both the executive and legislative arms of government must recommit ourselves to offering selfless service to the people and delivering concrete democracy dividend in accordance with our electoral promises. On my part and that of my administration, I pledge anew our commitment to diligently fulfilling every component of our electoral pact with the people, the Renew Hope agenda. We shall be faithful to truth, faithful to equity, and faithful to justice. We shall exercise our authority and mandate to govern with fairness, respect for the rule of law, and commitment to always upholding the dignity of all our people. On this note, I wish us a happy Democracy Day celebration and pray that the light of liberty shall never be extinguished in our land. Thank you all, and may God continue to bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Who wants to tell me the answer? This way.
Take it from me. The mind-blowing way to do things is the Glow LTE advanced way. When you stream, it's like you're in the drama itself. When you make calls, you reach where others can't. Cookie! Doing business is like running Wall Street from your street. And when you play,
I did beat you guy. We'll see about that.
it's like traveling the world without moving an inch.
Is that Toby in your room?
You can download in the blink of an eye in 4K.
Go.
And when you go for your dreams, it's like running with the strength of 3 nations behind you.
Glow LTE Advanced, the power of 3 data networks in one. Get a Glow SIM or dial *301#.
Good morning and happy Democracy Day. Today is June 12th, of course. I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome to the program.
You know, the president kept talking about independence, sort of, and I was going to say Happy Independence Day anyway, but this is Sunrise Daily Democracy Day edition. Welcome to the show. I'm Kaido Kikulu.
And it's significant that the president counted 30 years. It's been 30 years since that historic day, and we're glad to be part of history on the 30th year this morning. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
A host of journalists who were live and active on June 12, 1993. I wonder what memories they have right now of that day, because, hey, it's been an amazing, set of days, weeks, and months for us in Nigeria. And every year we've commemorated it, so to speak, especially since 1999. And that agitation for it to be recognized as a national holiday, Democracy Day, as opposed to May 29, I think it is quite, something quite significant that it's not just the federal government that made the sacrifice. It was Nigerians
that made the sacrifice
of that day.
Indeed.
I'm sure you understand why I said it's, I feel like part of history, because I know where I was in 1993. I was somewhere in a boarding house. So I'm here as a journalist today. So it feels pretty good.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. Share with us your experience. Where were you that day? What do you remember about it? And 30 years after, what has been the experience? Of course, those handles will be right there on your screen. Welcome to the show once again. Let's get started.
All right, so straight away, let's get into the conversation we have with us here this morning. Professor Ademola Abbas, who's a professor of international law. He's also a global affairs analyst. He's former special advisor to a Lagos State governor on overseas affairs and investment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to ask you, Kyle, this question. Where were you on June 12, 1993?
I saw that coming. I think I was a student in the University of Lagos. Then I was studying law. Yes, I think I was in the University of Lagos at that point in time. Yeah.
That annulment, how did it come to you?
Well, it was a shock. To all Nigerians, not only me, obviously. It was a great shock because of the fact that, almost half of the result had been declared at that point in time, and Chief Abiola had won literally across the country, and it was adjudged then, and I'm happy that the president referred to that at that point in time. as probably the freest and the fairest election we ever held in the country. So it was a brutal shock. But anybody who then understood the antics of Ibrahim Babangida wouldn't be totally knuckled down when that came, because it was sort of, I think the country got used to his rather diabolical means of playing politics and playing with the lives and toys with the life of the people. So from that point of view, I think in a way one was a little cautiously prepared, not prepared for annulment. I mean, Babangida enriched our vocabularies beyond any other Nigerian leader, to step aside, annulment, chairperson, and so many things and that came to light at that point. We have to be grateful to him for doing that kind of a lexicographical free of charge for that matter. But in terms of doing that for the people, I think it was gut-wrenching.
Still talking about the former military president, he put out a statement recently and saying that, look, as Nigerians, we haven't really taken full advantage, exploited the advantages or the benefits or the ideals of that freest and fairest election of our lives. What do you think he had in mind?
Well, the devil knows not the intent of a man's mind, especially Abibi's mind. I'm sure if you put two devils there, they won't be able to navigate it. But what is important, if you move beyond the messenger and you focus on the message, there is a bit of truism in what he said that we've not really sort of grappled with the lessons of that particular moment. And I'm happy you mentioned the ideals of democracy, which the president himself referred to when he was talking about the martyrdom of Chief M.K. Abiola, who he, appropriately referenced that he actually had a choice to abandon his mandate, but he chose not to choose the easier option, eventually sacrificing or losing his life at that point in time. And when the president was speaking, I was listening. When he was talking about the ideals of democracy, anybody who's a student of history will immediately remember that was one of the high points of Mandela's statements when he said the ideals of democracy are the ideals I wish to live by. If needs be, they are the ideals for which I am prepared to die. And I just think Chief MK Abiola sort of conceptualized that and animated that, embodied that kind of concept. When for Nigerians, I think, as I said, we have to look beyond the messenger, which is IBB, because if you are saying we haven't grappled with that, it's a bit of ironical.
So let's focus on the ideals, on the message.
Yeah. Precisely, that's what I'm saying. Look at the message. We haven't to the extent that you will have thought that since 1999 we ought to have moved beyond where we are today. But the truth is, and I always remind people of that, look, let us be very cautious before we put ourselves down. And I keep telling people we are not making excuses, but we are trying to explain sometimes why we find ourselves where we are today. I just came back from a trip, to Europe, and I was talking to some people, and they were saying, "Oh, Nigeria should have been." I said, "Look, slow down. We are not making excuses, but the truth is, when you're dealing with a country as heterogeneous as Nigeria, over 250 communities in the country, when you are dealing with different tribal groups, different religions, different this, different that, then, go back, we came back from a history of slavery to colonialism to neo-colonial wahala here and there, cut some slack. We are just how many years in independence? I am not saying we have to reinvent all the mistakes made by other countries, but every country, one way or the other, must learn its own lessons, must go through that rigmarole of history, one way or the other. So all those things that we should have learned, yes, we have technology today, we have examples to learn from. We are not probably moving as fast as we should have been doing, but again, we cannot beat ourselves too hard for going that. We are just hoping that, the present democratic tenets we have, hopefully, will begin to open new vistas of true democracy in the Nigerian polity.
It's interesting you use the word hope, and of course that is really significant to this day, 30 years ago, but it's also quite interesting as you were speaking. I recall that the president has visited the former head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, not once, and over the course of just even 2 years, he's visited him time and again. And you see in that statement was referring to the military, dictatorship, tyranny, how it degrades, it humiliates, but still we see that sort of handshake, as it were, between the military era, which he describes in those words, and the democracy, which we say, well, is way better. So what do you make of that handshake of sorts? Is it like a necessary evil?
Cardi, I like that particular phrase, the way you use the handshake. We talk about the handshake across Niger, but I think the first time I'm hearing handshake between civilians and military, that is commendable. Look, you're absolutely right. We cannot lose sight of the significance of that. Whenever people talk about, militaristic dominating Nigerian politics and this and that, I keep on telling them that, look, we have consistently made one mistake in Nigeria. And that is the mistake of thinking we can be governed by people in uniform for so many years. And suddenly we landed ourselves in democracy in 1999. And then you then expect the same military that has been so used to their own ways and orders to start taking orders or backseat from the civilians. There's something they call a transformation. There's an institution I'll come to in Switzerland called DICAV. It's Democratic Control of Armed Forces. You have to take deliberate steps to reprocess your armed forces, especially when they have been tainted by political offices. You have to reprocess them. You have to remanufacture them to be civilian compliant. We haven't done that in Nigeria. We're just thinking we can wake up one day and by miracle or magic, the same person who has been... Look, anybody today who is over 40, 50 years old, including me in Nigeria, was not used to people debating. We never watch our parliamentarians debating in this. So, and that's why Nigerians are somehow we are quite agitated when we argue. We never learn the tenets of, debates.
That's very significant. My apologies. Yeah. So you're saying essentially that even the civilians themselves, beyond the military transition, the civilians themselves need to transit.
Precisely. We need to transit, but I'm saying it must start, but first and foremost, because we're talking about democracy now of civilians now, we need to transform first our military institution. And because we haven't done that, there is always, as if there is always an unspoken fear in the mind of the political class that unless we get the buy-in of the military establishment, albeit they are no longer in physical power, especially those that have controlled the countries for numerous years, whether you are Bubakar, whether you are IBB, whether you are these, unless you have their buy-in, there is a kind of deep-seated fear that things might not go well the way that you want to. And I think that still comes from the fact that, we have not really done that transformation of the military and put them, just as an example, there was a debate about a week ago when they were talking about who should be your NSA, Nigerian National Security Advisor. And I was reading the newspapers and somebody, I think the military came out, I don't know who or them, whether it's the CDS or whoever, who came out and said, whoever is going to be the NSA must be somebody in uniform, must be an armed forces person. Otherwise, what is important was the rationale for that statement. And the gentleman said, otherwise the person might not be respected by the military and by the armed forces. Immediately, that democratic control of armed forces came to my mind. In the U.S., all the NSAs in the U.S. are civilians. Condoleezza Rice, John Bolton, all of them are civilians. If you are appointed by the commander-in-chief of armed forces of a country who is a civilian, how can you say you not respect that NSA simply because it doesn't come from the armed forces?
And to move on that wavelength, is it significant that, with the end of the Muhammadu Buhari administration, that we have, drawn the curtain on the old guard, of the military regime? He was a former general, in a democratic dispensation. Now we have somebody whose democratic credentials, unchallenged, they are evident. We still refer to his participation in NADECO during the June 12th. So is that the end of the old guard and a new era, when you consider that, in fact, in his speech this morning, he referred to Nigerians as fellow compatriots? So is this significant of what is to come?
Well, as they say, futurology is always problematic. I wish I could say, honestly, yes. But obviously, we'll be fooling ourselves here if we say automatically yes. The current government will be in power for 4 years or 8 years, whenever. But whenever the mandate of this current administration terminates, we don't know what comes next. I'm not saying the military are going to plan coup and come back, but to answer your question is that you must still see a generosity coming up and saying they want to run for election. And there's nothing stopping an ex-military personality from running an election. So from that point of view, I don't think I'm necessarily going to be worried if, for instance, tomorrow, a former military head of state or a military whatsoever comes up and say, I want to run. They have their democratic right to contest elections in Nigeria. But what is important, as I was saying earlier on, is that once they come within the democratic foray They are civilians. They must play by democratic rules and tenets. And that is what is still missing until the Nigerian government, and I hope that we can begin to take that steps now, recognizes that, look, we need to reformat our military personnel to be able to comply with democratic tenets, and we are going to be playing with fire at the end of the day.
It's quite interesting. I didn't catch that part, where someone was recommending a military, person for NSA. But now that it looks like that term handshake will become a thing now in our conversation. Now that we have identified that indeed there is that sort of handshake, and we don't know how long it will last for. If you were to rate Nigeria's democracy right now, how would you rate it? What percentage are we in practicing, true democracy right now with that sort of handshake we have seen? Could you rate us maybe 1 to 100?
Well, 1 to 100, when you look across the globe, because we have to have a context to this. If you look across Africa, we might rate ourselves that probably we are operating within Africa continent, maybe 60% or thereabout. But if you look across globe, especially those who gave us democracy, so to say, and even if you look within Africa itself, let's go historical here. If you look within Africa, I know when you go to Southeast as an example, they are more acephalous in those days. But when you come to Southwest, I'm just in pre-colonial context. We used to be very, very democratic in Southwest under the Oyo Empire. You had the Oyo Mesi, the checks and balances in some of our kingdoms, and I'm sure they are there in the Northern Kingdom, in different kingdom, in the Benin Kingdom and co. The kind of checks and balances we had in those days, actually they dwarf what we have today. So what I'm saying is that if you were to measure, to gauge our democracy today by any barometer, whether by the Western democracies that we seem to have taken all the formal ones from, or by the ones we practiced, our monarchy, we practiced in the pre-colonial time, I think we are probably operating about 30 or 40%. To be honest with you, I mean that is just my own fair assessment.
That's poor assessment.
Well, that is, I would say. Well, I don't want to use pass, fail, or poor, but I would rather say it's a work in progress assessment. I would think I'll hold up between 35 and 40. When I'm an academic.
Exactly, I was going to say that. So
I'm an academic. When you grade a student and they score 35, 40, 40 is usually sort of a reasonable pass mark before you get to the average. You're thinking 35, 40, if they'd made a bit of more effort, they could have landed in 40. We have some kind of level of seriousness. And that is where I'm seeing us now. That for better or for worse, we've fumbled, we've fallen, we've risen, we've done, which is commendable since 1999. That at least we have stayed with our democracy. Nobody should be deluded. Democracies are never born in a single day. It's a lot of work. Well, democracies don't start and end with elections or winning elections.
I wonder if it is enough, to commend ourselves for staying in democracy. And, from here, I'd like us to also review again the lessons of June 12. If you consider that, according to history, it is said that, the problem was not particularly the North. I'm talking about this in terms of the unity of the country now, considering the fact that the former military president annulled the primaries that saw the emergence of 2 northern candidates, and that, what transpired for June 12, with the annulment of MK Abiola's election victory, was really what transpired between 2 generals. So if we consider that from that point, we've replicated our own Muslim ticket with the inability to replicate that victory that MK Abiola recorded across the country at that time, what lessons have we really learned in terms of the unity, that handshake across the Niger, from the west, from the south to the north?
Well, that's a very important question. Look, Nigeria is a very fractured society. Let's kid ourselves. I think what we need to start focusing seriously now is how to rebuild this nation. More often than not, when we talk about Nigeria problem, this and that solutions, we don't even take time to actually identify our problems first. We think because now we have a new government, then solutions will just come automatically. No, we have to take a step back. And it's a very important question you asked in terms of the annulment, in terms of we've not been able to replicate the victory, by which I think you meant the kind of cross-country kind of victory, acceptance which we saw in Chief MK Abiola. I think probably the only person, at that point in time that was so widely accepted. But I think, 1993 was a watershed in Nigerian politics for so many reasons. And I'm happy you mentioned that it wasn't a problem of the North. Because part of our problems also, and I think I said that here sometime when these elections that brought in the current government, I was there a few times, and I did mention the fact that Nigeria suffers from a terrible trust deficit. And because of that, we are very suspicious of one another now. And that suspicion began long before 1993, but actually was accentuated in 1993 when a general, decided to annul the election, judged to be freest and fairest in the country at that point in time. You don't wake up when a human being makes a mistake. It might take maybe 2 days, 3 days when you are spoken to and you are shown how to correct. But when a nation makes a mistake, it could take decades before you fix it. And I think that is what we are facing today. How we are going to be able to amend that, we need a lot of creativity and imagination. But unfortunately, that is one thing that has been lacking brutally in Nigerian leadership, at least up to this particular point.
Perhaps one of the challenges we have here, following up on that, which you said, and Bukola's question, is that of the power play. You spoke to that. We're talking about our democracy, and you clearly made it clear that, look, we have a lot of work to do on our democracy. But there is always some, how do I put this, puppet masters, so to speak, who act behind the scene. There are those who say, that the June 12 annulment didn't just happen. It was something orchestrated by political, players, major political players who spoke to the ears of the military president at the time. If you would look at that time and look at now, because what happened at that time was a coup against democracy, so to speak, in that, many Nigerians came out. 5 million Nigerians came out, voted for one person, but 3 million Nigerians came out and voted for the other person. It was a two-party system. Now, looking at that, what the play that happened at that time, that truncated that democracy at that time, and now, we're 23 years now? 24 years into our democratic practice now, we still have a situation where, as you said, some would say we're crawling in our democratic development. These powers behind the scene, how significant are they? How vulnerable is the president or the head of government at any given point in time to these things, so that people will understand that the president or the governor or whoever it is needs a lot of support, and the people who mill around them need to be, there needs to be an entry process of sorts.
I'm smiling because that's a very important question. If you remember, it's important because you said something. Your question was double-pronged. You said, how significant are those shadowy powers are, but more importantly, how vulnerable is the president dealing with those powers? It's a very important question. And I said in one of my appearances here, during the elections itself, last election, and I said something. You did ask me the question whether it was you or Laulu, who asked me the question of the three candidates, who would I be rooting for? And my answer was, for me, the president I was looking for at that point in time was, number one, somebody who will harness the best resources in the country, the best talent in the country. And then number two is somebody that when all political pressures come, as they will come, who has got the stamina to withstand this pressure, the stamina and the experiences. And clearly you figured out who I was. And I mentioned it, and I think the killer question then came when you asked me that in terms of consistency, and over the three candidates, I told you point blank, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was the most consistent because he's moved from ACN to AC to APC, never really cross-carpeted from one party to another, which was a fact anyway. But anyway, so, and I'm relating that back to the question now, that first, how powerful, how important are those shadowy powers? They're always going to be, not only in Nigeria, in every country you have in the world. And take a traverse of all, I could sit here and spend the next 2 hours from the way back in Latin America, download every goddamn thing. You will see that they're always there. Even in the US, they're there. In the UK, they're there. Look, Boris Johnson just quit a couple of days ago. And don't forget, he said, I'm being witch hunted and I'm going to fight back. He said, I know who are my enemy in the party, in the same Republican party, the same Conservative Party. That tells you he was talking about some particular powers within the party. So it's, number one, it's across, and they're very, very powerful. You can't run away with that. But then the next question is, how do you deal with them? You are the president. And that is what I said, you need imagination and creativity to deal with them. Number one, as a president or as a leader of a country, or as a government, you have to be transparent. That's important. You have to be above board. The problem is when you have a leadership that is compromised, there is no way you can. They say if you want to fight with the devil, you got to get a very long, fork at the end of the long spoon. I remember, I think it was President Yar'Adua, Musa Yar'Adua, of blessed memory, the one that died. He said something when he was talking about energy in the country. He said that energy was being controlled by a cabal, and that it was so difficult to fight them. I almost fainted when the president said that. That was like the president capitulating to, a cabal in that country that you are the president of. So I'm not, minimizing the significance of that. Again, I think one of the true things late Sonny Abacha said in his life as a military head of state in Nigeria was when he said, if an insurgency lasts more than 24 hours, then the government has a hand in it. I think that's the most important thing for me that he ever said.
Did he really say that? I've heard people say
it's been contested.
It did say that. It is. I think I'll be able to, if I've offered, I'll be able to prove that, give you that proof. But what is important is, if you look beyond the messenger, let's even focus on that message. But that tells you, and even in the last administration, some people highly placed in government came out, including governors, we can't contest that, who said, people are funding Boko Haram are in these high-ranking people. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why we've been told why the DSS now went after former CBN governor, Mr. Emefiele, was that he was funding, allegedly funding terrorist groups and this and that. That is, of course, is innocent until otherwise proven. But what I'm trying to say here is that shadowy powers are always very, very powerful. But if you want to engage them as a president, as a leader of a democracy, leader of a country, number one, first, you must have no skeletons in your own cupboard. Because don't forget, they are like, those people you are talking about, they are like corruption. It's about protecting their interests. And I think Nuru Ribadu said, if you fight corruption, corruption will fight back. This is a very simple aphorism. So you have to be above board to be able to do that. Is the president vulnerable? Whether you are vulnerable or not, it will depend on number one, how you came to power. I'm not talking about a particular president. I'm talking about generally how you came to power. What deals did you do? Who did you do the deals with? Because at the end of the day, I'll give an example. I was a party to a government in Lagos State here. And when people were hoopla, then when they were blaming the same president, Asiwaju, for pushing out Ambode in Lagos State and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I told people, I reminded them, I said, make no mistake. If your sport is riding on the back of a tiger, then do not complain when you end up in his belly when the tiger is hungry, because you are the first he's going to snatch. So when you ride on the back of a tiger, you must make sure you feed that tiger to stupor, so that he's either never hungry, or when he's hungry, he never remembers you are even at his back. It's what I'm saying, you cannot approbate and reprobate at the same time. If your sport is to come to a particular thing by leaning on godfathers, godmothers, and this and that, godfathers and godmothers are going to ask you for a pound of flesh when the time comes.
Very interesting insights you've given. And I mean, from someone who's been in the action, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that you're speaking from a place of knowledge and real experience. Quite a number of issues to actually pull out of. I was going to ask a question, but you have given me questions to ask. I mean, you talked about the CBN governor, for example. There's been a court order which is being contested. Why is the DSS arresting him? So in terms of procedure, that is being questioned, because I know you mentioned that. About the shadow or skeletons in cupboard, again, some will say, well, the current president has had his own fair share of question marks still hanging on his head. So that's another thing. But let's go to the speech, because we can spend 2 hours on that one alone. The president, particularly spoke about Nigerians making more sacrifices for our country. And I imagine a lot of Nigerians listening to him and thinking, wait a minute, I think past 30 years has been 30 years of sacrifices. Just how much more sacrifices can we make as a nation? But don't forget, he talked about poverty. At this rate, over 100 million Nigerians are in multidimensional poverty. Some will say that is enough sacrifice. But he also promised that your sacrifice will not be in vain. And I wonder, how believable is that? Because for a lot of people, they might be thinking, we can't take any more of this. So really, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, thanks for that. That was very important. I'm trying to rein myself in because, I spent time on this platform talking about the fact that, I think that was during the campaign and the election. I said, look, I personally believe that President Asiwaju will come in with a lot of experience, and he's been there before. And I always tell people, just permit me to make that reference, that in one particular aspect, I think he has achieved something as a politician of this level that Chief Awolowo never achieved, and that was being able to work across almost everybody across the country. He built bridges across the country, which is very important, number one, in terms of your credibility, in terms of legitimacy, but more importantly, in terms of your ability to deliver. Because, and I'm happy you mentioned that when you were talking, he didn't just ask us for sacrifice, and that's important. Sacrifice to what? To give more to the country that we've been giving that we've not seen the result. But then he went ahead to reel out what will be our benefit. In essence, what he did, he said, I am my government. It's a pact. President Asiwaju today promised Nigeria, entered into a contract with Nigerians within 17 minutes on national television that I shall fulfill every mandate, everything that we campaigned on. So
but is this justiciable? Forgive me for butting. Yeah. How justiciable is this? I mean, we've had pacts, we've had promises. Yes. In fact, if we were to compile all of those promises, yes, we'll have volume. So how?
I agree with you, Kayode. I agree entirely, and that's why I said that because Nigeria will suffer from trust deficit, we have become suspicious of everything, and we can't blame ourselves for it. But what I'm saying is that somebody came in, and within 24 hours took two important steps. Albeit maybe one is still on it, which is subsidy that we almost all agree had been very fraudulent. And for 24 years, other presidents were not able to do that. He did that. Boom. Second one is the disparate exchange rates. You know,
it's still disparate.
It's still disparate, but there is move, we know, in terms of, and initially there was a rumor that there was going to be, you know, and I think...
And the CN debunked that is...
You know, I mean, for me, that should already show that I should start, if I'm doubting the president before, or the government before, I think what the president is asking Nigeria is that, look at what we've done in the last 2 weeks, and let's see whether we can begin to give us a benefit of the doubt. I think that is very important. I don't think President Asiwaju expects Nigerians to simply say, oh yes, we've taken you on, okay, we agree with everything you say. But no, but we are saying, you know what? It's a new government. So far, they've taken some steps. And we are saying, let us be cautiously optimistic that everything he says, the government will stick to. But at least he is giving Nigerians something that they can hang on to. Look, all we can hang on to is hope.
You know, Mr. Abbas, I wonder if what the president has said is enough to hang on to, you know, considering the fact that Nigerians have had a lot to, you know, bear in the last 8 years of the administration, particularly in the last 4 years. The Naira redesign, Nigerians groaned beneath that weight. And, you know, inflation from 2015, that was 9%, is over 22% now. And following the increase in the pump price of petrol to 500 naira per litre, inflation is bound to, you know, go up yet again, and there are no immediate solutions beyond what the president has promised in terms of words. So can we begin to look at, you know, a possibility where the political class itself should be the ones, you know, making the sacrifices? Can the president, as a Democrat himself, urge the political class to make sacrifices in terms of, you know, their remuneration? The other day, Chief Afefa Babalola was asking, you know, valid questions about why the political class, the former governors, should be going away with severance packages to the tune of millions of naira.
Yeah, look, Bukola, your question is double-edged. You know, I agree entirely that we cannot just take what President has said on the face value. We can't hang to his words. And that's why I said that I don't think he's even asking us to hang on to his words. But he's telling us we've done this. We've removed the subsidy. Just yesterday, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, when they increased the retirement age of judges and this and that.
Friday.
Which is really commendable in terms of. I think that's why I say I think what the president is saying is that we're not just speaking here. Look at what we have done in a very short time, and we're inviting you to trust us more and give us your support for us to be able to do more. Now, whether the president or his government can then get that what he requests from Nigerians then depends on what the government does as we go on. So that is, you know, one leg of the. And then second part of your question,
the political class.
Was the political class? That's a very important question. We have a very, very, you know, overly weighty, overly big government of all structures. You don't want to know how much members of House of Representatives and Senate, how much they're earning. And you have 1 billion, people that, hundreds of thousands of political jobbers that you don't really, you can do without in some circumstances. So I don't think it's not an either or situation. All those people you are talking about also, they are part of Nigerians anyway that are going to make the sacrifice.
But the question is, what percentage are they compared to the number of Nigerians suffering?
Those people will make two levels of sacrifices here. The sacrifice they make as general Nigerians and the sacrifice they must make as political office holders. Because I did talk about the president's ability to be able to carry the country forward depends largely on his own legitimacy and credibility. How he's perceived. When I say I as the president, I'm talking about him and his government as a whole. That is the executive, the legislature, judiciary. How the government is able to convince people that, take a look at us. Take a look at the kind of sacrifices we are making at our own level. So we are not telling Nigerians to make these sacrifices while we are, living large and we are doing things like that. When people are going on in convoys of 500 cars, 20 million cars and this and that, the country will be looking at you and thinking, what is going on? When you have policemen should be serving public. When you have like 5 or 6 of them attached to a single member of parliament, Nigerians are asking themselves, what kind of sacrifice am I making? These are people who should be looking after malls and kiosks and shops and patrolling our roads to reduce crime rates on our street. So what I'm saying in essence is that the president realizes, and I think he recognizes, the fact that Nigerians have been asked for too many times with no result to show for it. And I think that was why he immediately went on a limbo to say, look, for doing this, we are going to develop infrastructure, education, transportation, and this and that. Because he knew at that point in time that Nigeria will be asking, why are we going to be sacrificing again? But I think...
So is it legit? Will we be calling on RAMFAC now, to make a reduction in the salaries and allowances of the executive, i.e. the, executive and the legislature?
Well, the executive, the president can do. The legislature, he cannot. In any democracy, the legislatures fix their own. They are going to pass the bill. They fix their own remuneration. However, it is up to the electorate who put the legislature in. And I think, TV stations like Channel Station should be able to lead that discourse. And sometimes, it's a very important question. You can generate this for people to discuss. Let the CSO discuss it. Let the people discuss it. Because when you have respected, media houses, that are popular. I'm not talking about populist media houses. That difference between a popular and a populist. I won't go into that. That you have a solidity in your credibility. You can lead. You can channel certain discourses in the country and say, look, shouldn't we start talking about remuneration that legislatures themselves get? Because the executive will have no power over that. However, those who elect those legislators can start claiming that, you know what, we are going through hell on our own. If you are my representative, I want you to begin to champion that in your house to reduce. Let's even begin by saying all legislators, whether your House of Representatives, publish what you earn. Let's know what you earn. When I was in Lagos, I was a member of cabinet in Lagos State. My salary was published across. My salary was about 130,000 naira per month. But then you had all the perks, your newspaper allowance, this allowance, that allowance. Everything bumped it up to about 800 or 700,000 naira per month. And if you must know, I left a $14,000 job in my previous life, because I believe I wanted to contribute to my society. That was my own sacrifice at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is that nothing stops constituents from calling on their representatives. Do you mind publishing what you earn so I can engage?
You're still putting it at their whim, so to speak, because RAMFAC, for instance, as you mentioned, is a product of the law. Yeah. Now, you also said the National Assembly fixes their own, so it's not something that is debated. Who will take the lead in ensuring that the members of the National Assembly do the needful that many people are talking about? This conversation we are having is not new. It's 24 years old, what legislators earn in Nigeria. So who should take the lead in that regard? Professor Chief Afebalola has made his own comment, and that's not the first time we're having it. CSOs have said the same thing. So who takes the lead?
Well, there should be a concerted effort. I talked about credible media houses working with CSOs. Let's have a national debate about it. You see, we can talk about these things individually. If there is no critical mass, if there is no consensus other than as lawyers call, if there is no meeting of the mind across board, the CSOs, the media, and let's force a national discussion. Look, what we've been doing, Chief Afewala, I have a great respect for him. We speak as an individual. It goes. We raise it like this today, it goes. Somebody raises it tomorrow, it goes. Let's take a decisive, and that's why I began by saying, why don't we actually begin to work with CSOs, to work with constituents, and begin, first and foremost, let constituents begin to call on, I have a right as a Nigerian. I can go to court and tell the court, you know what, I am being represented in this particular government by this. I want this person to produce what he or she ends. Freedom of Information Act.
Interestingly, there was this conversation was with Chief Afewala was with trade agency, trade group, NASSIMA.
Yeah.
So hopefully they will be able to do something about it. But there's something Bukola, raised the other time that I'd like you to, and I think we've spoken about it peripherally. She talked about the political class. I would like to put it in the light of what Professor Olurode, who is a former INEC commissioner, said. Talked about an elite consensus. Said Nigerian elite focus on irrelevant issues of governance, of who governs, and ethno-religious issues of identity politics and all of that. Now, he now said it's important not to exaggerate its significance, nor equate it with the substantive issues of architecture of governance. More appearances cannot be equated with substance. So, this elite consensus, political class, as Bukola put it, how do we aggregate them? They're listening now. They watch the prominent popular media houses, as you put it. How do we aggregate them to think more about the substantive issues as opposed to the peripheral issues?
Whenever I hear questions like this, the first thing that shoots through my mind is there seems to be an assumption of homogeneity of that elite class. The elite class is never homogeneous in any society. We might think we are elites because we've been to universities, we are middle classers, and so on, we are informed and this and that. But you might be shocked that people who have not been to schools before, who operate in some fringes of society, who have informal education, are better elitists than. So first and foremost, we have to find consensus about which elites are we talking about. If you talk about the political class, political elite, then you are in trouble because you are asking them to commit a hierarchy. I'm sure you know what the hierarchy is. It's a suicide for them to plan their own sword and then fall on it. They are only going to talk about things that will benefit them. You're never going to get those elite talk about things that are relevant. Relevant, that is not relevant to them. Yeah. Relevant to you and I. And that is why you cannot get 10 parliamentarians today to talk about their salaries. They're not going to participate in that discussion at all. And I think you remember, I'm sure you know a particular senator in this country who first of all bailed the cat, so to say, about how much actually they were getting. And as they say, where that one landed the gentleman today, who has become more proficient on Twitter and stuff like that. Than what I'm saying is that he paid in quote, he paid a price for that because he was almost ostracized by his own circle.
And it's quite interesting. We're winding down. We have less than a minute, but it's quite interesting how you now see people picking it up from there. It looks like it just happened and people moved on as well because we have other things to face. Bigger fish to fry, as they say in Nigeria. But as we wind down, some will say we've been in a time freeze for 30 years. Hope. Renewed hope. The president literally spent most of his speech referring to things that happened then. Yeah. Is there any similarity between both men? Are we seeing another MKO of sorts?
Well, I think, as Democrats, I think there is a similarity between MKO and President Tinubu. But, in terms of message of hope, obviously, I think Abiola's message was hope. 93 at that point in time, he embodied that vision. And of course, President himself was one of those who actually spearheaded the whole. So there's no surprise that there is a kind of a similarity in their messages and also in their understanding of where we are. But in terms of going forward, look, and again, that's why I keep on saying that I think Nigeria, I would say very cautiously, I would say that I think Nigeria has the best, at this moment, the best shot at beginning to lay proper foundation for democracy. Mark my word, I'm not saying that we are going to go to El Dorado, no. But I think we have the best chance now of beginning to lay the proper foundations for democracy. And I think if anything that has gone in the last 3 weeks of this government, or 2 weeks since May 29, is anything to go by, I think we can begin to say, well, maybe, just maybe, there is really a silver lining at the end of our tunnel.
Well, there are those who would also say it depends on whose interest you're speaking about.
Precisely.
But we have to leave it at that for now. Professor Ademola Abbas, Professor of International Law, Global Affairs Analyst, former Special Advisor to Lagos State Governor on Overseas Affairs and Investment. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
Sacrifice the $14,000.
Thank you very much for having me.
Is it okay to say Happy Democracy Day to you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, we're back after now to take on other issues. To stay with us.
When you have cavities, it hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out.
New beginnings are always colorful. When we celebrate the start of life's journey, we marry in colors. With our proudly Nigerian Dulux paints, now available in any color. Express your world however you want it. Visit a Dulux Color Center to get any color instantly. Dulux, let's color.
To give the confidence that only comes from knowing you are fully sorted. To show up for you just when you need a hand. And when retirement comes with all its worries and storms, to ensure we will stand by you and give you the coverage that you deserve. Make the perfect choice. Choose PAL Pensions today.
PAL Pensions, your pal for life.
Ovieme.
Oh, I wish you were here.
I'm always with you.
But it's not the same without you.
MTN 5G's amazing technology will change how we experience life and the internet. Get ready to encounter the incredible. And remember, no be juju, na MTN 5G.
Nigeria, a nation at a crossroads of greatness. On June 12, 2023, join Channels Television on Democracy Day as we usher you into the hallways of national discourse at a post-election period needing national reconciliation in the face of fractured political expectations, a challenged economy, fuel subsidy removal, and a new ruling class.
The first subsidy is gone.
And what's in store for Nigerians?
The reality is the market will determine what the real price of our debt is. The taxes that hurt any economy most is the taxes on investors.
Join your multiple award-winning TV station as erudite minds discuss the issues on Democracy Day, June 12, 2023, exclusively on Channels Television, a network built on trust.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us. Still on strengthening Nigeria's democratic process and a number of other issues as have been raised this morning. We have with us Eze Onyepere, who is a lawyer and lead director, Center for Social Justice. He joins us, as you can see, from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Well, you've been listening to us for quite a bit, having all of that conversation. Today is Democracy Day, and 30 years down the line. Again, I'll ask you this question. Where were you on June 12, 1993?
Well, let me start by saying that I've been in Nigeria, and of course we voted, and there was this hope of a new renewal. And of course, Nigerians were already tired of military dictatorship, and the whole idea was that we need to start afresh. And there was this man who brought that hope, and of course, he won majority of the vote. So I've been in Nigeria, and of course, we voted.
Well, you know, going by that word hope, there are those who would say hope is not a strategy. But if it's the only thing you have, then it's the only thing you have. So here we are, another government this time, you know, came on the campaign of hope. And there are those, as we have asked here, raised the issues, who would say it's a very, very expensive commodity now, the hope, particularly when our trust bank account is greatly depleted. What would you say to the average Nigerian right now about hope in the face of greatly depleted trust deficiency?
Well, there is no other option than to keep hoping, because once you lose hope, once you lose that iota of thing that keeps everybody looking to the future, is as much as saying the society is withering and that there is nothing more to look out for. Not hope that you are looking at one person or the other, whether it's a president or another person, but in the fact that as a human society, as a human being, as a community, we must look with hope to the future. We must continue to strive to improve the performances of yesterday and to hold and demand accountability from the leadership. Yes, since 1999, there was so much hope, there was so much euphoria, but more or less it's evaporated because our lives have not improved. Even the ordinary voting process, which you have improved over the years, is still very, very contentious. That's why you still have all kinds of petitions before election petition tribunals. But as a human being, as a human society, we do not have any option but to strive to improve from the performances of yesterday. And that striving to improve is encapsulated in the word hope.
You know, the president spoke to, I think, those cases in some sense, saying that if you're not able to bear the pain of defeat, then you sort of don't deserve the joy of victory. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but we'll come to that. It just hit me that he made reference to that. But still on this, topic of hope, I wonder for you, listening to the president's first nationwide broadcast. Yes, he gave that inauguration speech, but this is his first nationwide broadcast on such a day as this. Did that hope come across to you as, okay, it's a thing that we can hold on to, at least from the words of this man?
Not really, because this is not the first presidential speech we have listened to. From the days of Obasanjo down to Yar'Adua, to Jonathan, to Muhammadu Buhari, and to the present. What Nigerians need is positive action. Action that you can see and interpret is geared towards improving livelihoods, improving the rule of law, improving democracy to make sure it is one man, one woman, one vote. And of course, referring back to the issue of if you can't take the pain of defeat, of course you cannot be expected to be celebrating victory maybe in due course. The challenge that Nigerians have with issues around defeat and victory, if it is very clear and straightforward, like in a football match, somebody dribbles the whole field and scores, all you see is applause, thunderous applause. You see the genuines. But if you dribble the first person, dribble the third one, ball goes up, and you raise your hand and touch the ball, and the referee pretends like nothing happened, and half of the field is saying, oh, we thought it's a handball. The other said, oh, it's about being a genius. At the end of the day, when you score, opinion will be divided. So we want to see our democracy deepened in such a way and manner that when people lose elections, it will be clear to all that this is what has happened. And you can ask yourself, why is it that over the years, even though we claim we are deepening our democracy, after every election, there are more petitions going to the election petition tribunals than in the last case. So this question of hope, we need to see concrete action. We need to see steps. We need to see new laws, new policies that should give us the hope that we are beginning afresh.
Right. I think also when you use that analogy of football, the judiciary or the election petitions court will be the VAR that gives us an opportunity to seek redress and correct whatever it is that may have gone wrong. So, yes, it's also important to add that one to it, going by the football analogy. But I'd like you to also speak to some of the points he raised in that speech, about 16, 17 minutes long. He asked Nigerians not just for sacrifice, but we must rededicate ourselves to hope. And this is Nigerian, so I imagine it talks about the governed and the government as well. What do you expect us to be doing as government and the people if we must rededicate ourselves to this hope, which looks like everybody accepts is something we can hold on to?
I recall as a young man in the university listening to Babangida, Ibrahim Babangida, when he made a speech that said for today or for the future, we were being called upon to sacrifice our today of the 1980s. So there is nothing new. The expectation is that instead of, for instance, the fuel subsidy removal, the common people feel the blunt the more. I would have expected in a speech like this, where the government, the executive, the legislature, and all those in the corridors of power will have announced through the leadership of the president the sacrifices they want to make, how they want to cut down on the cost of governance, how they want to cut down on what they are taking, so that you lead from the front, you lead by the power of your example. Because like I said, I've had so many presidents call on us to tighten our belt. As we are tightening our belt, they are loosening there so that they can accommodate more of the fullness of the land, of the milk and honey, of the good things, why people are being called upon to make sacrifice. So the first way to inspire hope, to convince us that there is really hope around the corner, is by the action of leading from the front. And not leading is not about platitudes, because the days are gone when we will be repeating the same stories that Babangida says, the same stories Abacha stayed, the same stories that Abdul Salam Obasanjo, and we are now praising it as if to say there is any magical thing in the world, there is anything inspirational. We need action, and action should start by, let us see who your ministers will be. Let us see who your special advisors and what agenda they're unfolding. And by then, we can now begin to trust to say, some new hope is in the air and something good is about happening or has even started happening.
Indeed, Mr. Oyekpere, many would say that that is critical, and to deepen our democracy, it's also important to look at the conversation about the rule of law. And if you look at the president's speech, he said he described the symbol of democracy, MK Abiola, saying that for him democracy is eternal. But he also said something. He said it is about rule of law and vibrant judiciary that can be trusted. So if democracy is about compliance with the rule of law, can we begin to scrutinize the first few actions of this administration, particularly in the sack of, the suspension rather of the CBN governor, and view it in terms of the rule of law? How much of compliance has been done in that regard? And just to give you a lead, some would say it's a popular decision because of the role of the CBN governor in the Naira redesign policy of the former administration. But then again, what's the altruism in that move, considering the fact that that policy was said to have been targeted on the president, who was the APC candidate at the time?
Well, when we begin to talk about the rule of law, it's not about the rule of a man who feels A or B might have hurt him. The CBN Act is clear in Section 11. It talked about the removal process of a CBN governor. A prayer supported by 2/3 majority of the Senate to the president asking that the CBN governor be removed. I cannot recall if there has been any such resolution or prayer. So if we use that as a gauge for the rule of law, the action of the president in the last 2 weeks, then I'm sure that that will not pass muster in terms of it's not in accordance with the rule of law. Whether you call it suspension, whether you call it removal, he has been removed from office, and the procedure set out in the enabling law has not been followed. But let me also correct one impression here. I am not a fan of Emefiele, and throughout that period, I even came here and on several write-ups in the print media, it was my view that what was done was wrong because the CBN simply went beyond the remit of monetary policy in doing what it did, as well as the fact that Mr. Emefiele, who was supposed to be not to be partisan, went out of his way to buy the card and become a member of the ruling party to qualify him to even dream of going to contest for presidency. So what he did was wrong. And I'm saying if he has to be removed from office, it has to be in accordance with due process of law and legal stipulations. So it is not about what the president says about the rule of law that I will use to judge his performance. It is more about what he does, because it is easy to give a speech, it's easy to read out platitudes, but your concrete action shows where you stand in matters of the rule of law. And also, somebody had talked about judges being the VAR when I made the analogy of football. Now, this is where the problem starts, and there's no need for anybody to pretend and be beaten about the bush. The judges who are supposed to be the VAR, who are supposed to be the ultimate referee, have got the jurisprudence wrong. The jurisprudence of elections in terms of who actually won the election is what should the judges do? What is their province? What are they looking for? It should be an inquiry to establish the candidate that actually got the mandate of the voters. Since democracy is about the votes. But over the years, what we have seen is that the judiciary has replaced that inquiry with all kinds of technicalities, all kinds of evidential rules that are not directed at answering the question of who got the mandate, the overwhelming mandate of the people in accordance with the Constitution. Just like what happened in Yobe, the Lawan case, all you see are all manners of booby traps and subterfuge, which is no longer addressed at that ultimate question of ensuring that the votes count. So at the end of the day, what you see the judges have been doing is a rule of technicalities. They set exams for themselves, ignoring the fundamental question that was placed before them, and then give whatever they give as decision. And of course, whoever wins will say, oh, the rule of law, Daniel is come to judgment. Whoever loses simply licks his wounds and goes, because once the Supreme Court says it, that's final. There is no other thing you can say. You can go and lick your wounds and write all kinds of literature, but that's the law.
It is the expectation that, the substance of the cases in this time, in this era, will trump technicalities. But, going back, to the conversation on the rule of law, I wonder if, because the argument also goes in favor of the president, that in past administrations, specifically under former President Goodluck Jonathan, there was also similar move, which was interpreted by the court, but unchallenged, to the extent that it was said that there was a right, to suspend the former CBN governor, since it was not particularly a sack. That on the one hand. Now, is this, because they say the morning shows the day, is this, does this speak of what is to come for this administration in terms of compliance with the rule of law?
Now, the fact that a court says you have the right to suspend, when in actual fact what you did is a sack. You see, I'm not going to enter into the sheer legalism and technicalism of people who want you to cut a pound of flesh without shedding one drop of blood, when you know that there is no way you can pick up the flesh without the blood. The point is that the law is clear. This is a process to remove a serving CBN governor. whatever you go through the background and say it is suspension, when you had no intention ab initio to bring him back. I'm not saying a CBN governor who commits an offense should not be investigated and prosecuted, but I'm talking of what the law is clear on. So whoever sits somewhere, whether he's a judge of the High Court or Supreme Court, and decides to interpret clear provisions the other way around, I'm not particularly bothered. And this is where Nigerians had to stand firm. The judge is simply a public officer, paid at my tax expense, at your tax expense. We should insist that he also interprets the law the right way. I did not write the CBN Act Section 11. It is clear, written in black and white. Anybody who is educated enough can interpret it. He doesn't need to take a judge. But if you think that simply because you are a judge and you now turn clear things the other way and you expect me to clap for you, it's the same law school you went to that all of us went to, and the words are very, very clear. So what I'm saying is that the rule of law is not about the rule of man. It's not about our whims and caprices. It's not about our prejudices. And I'm saying there is a procedure. I didn't say don't remove him. There is a procedure. The fact that Jonathan did it, if what Jonathan did is wrong, even if you bring 100 presidents to repeat it, what Jonathan did cannot in any way be a justification for violating what's written in English language, okay, that everybody can read. So let's just get these things clear, and let's not start the obfuscation of somebody interpreting things upside down. The law is clear, black and white.
Well, you also, I recall you commended the condemned, that's the word, the amendment of the CBN Act by the 9th Assembly just a few days before President Buhari left office. And I know you've been quite vocal about some of these processes, but I'd like you to speak to a point. The president in his speech incidentally talked about the rule of law. Just after he said democracy is eternal, he talked about the rule of law and said that he wants to uphold the rule of law, have a vibrant judiciary. And he talked about the harmonization, which he recently signed into law, as a testament to that. A lot of people have imputed, different reasons and all of that. But I wonder, in the whole scheme of this rule of law, which you want to be entrenched, since we say we're practicing democracy, how do you view that?
Well, if judges are to retire by 70, and that's the wisdom of the legislature, I have no objection. But the challenge I also see is that I need to call a spade a spade. Most Nigerians, whether they are judges or political office holders, usually try to reduce their age, okay? Somebody can be 70 and in the books is only acknowledging 60 or 65. I hope we are not going to get to the situation where you have somebody in his 80s, simply because he has doctored the books, still sitting in the judiciary, okay, by virtue of this new amendment. I have no objection to people who are healthy, who have the requisite intellect, still sitting and delivering judgment, but it will be a disaster if people alter their ages and that's 80, 80-something or 75, they're still sitting there. So if everybody can say the truth about the actual time he or she was born and abide by that truth, then it is good. But if we are still in a scenario where people can doctor their ages simply because they want to stay more on the bench or in any office, then this is not good enough.
Well, Mr. Nyekwere, there are those who would raise questions about the process of our democracy so far. Our previous guest spoke about the need for us to recognize that democracy is not a 100-meter dash. It's a marathon, and it's an adventure of sorts. We have to keep working at it, have to keep going at it. And one of the clear dictums of democracy is separation of powers, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. It would seem like this is the first time in our history where we are having the president, a former senator, the vice president, a former senator, first lady, former senator, well, just exited from the Senate, and a whole load of people may also be joining the cabinet as people from the legislature as well. For you, how significant is that in our drive or a quest for a more perfect democracy?
Well, there are two sides of this coin. if all these people have imbibed the positive virtues and qualities of a democracy in terms of having had legislative experience, and even the president having had the executive powers as a governor of a state, and you know what the legislature is all about, what their role is, and you are going to respect it, it's going to be a plus in terms of separation of powers and understanding that every arm of government has its duties under the Constitution. But the other side of it is that having been in the Senate or having been in the legislature, having been in the executive, having managed these affairs before, could also bring some negative spin in terms of you've understood all the issues, all the weak points in the legislature, and you may now decide to use it against the legislature in the relationship between the executive and the legislature. But ordinarily, it is a very good development. And what Nigerians want to see is an independent legislature, not a rubber stamp legislature. For instance, we are complaining today about things like the ways and means that accumulated up to 23 trillion before it was submitted for legislative approval after the fact that it's been spent. If we had a robust legislature, the outgoing legislature, if they were robust, if they were doing their duties very well, if they didn't consider themselves rubber stamp, there's no way 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 5 trillion, 10, 20, without their oversight powers and functions, exposing it, and even calling it short. Maybe they could have discovered this at 5 trillion and simply stopped it there. And in retrospect, what I did say about increasing the ways and means allowance from 5 to 15, look at every budget. Right. Ways and means is not a means of funding the deficit. It's a temporary advance. That's what the law says. And we had a crisis with only 5% authorization in the Act. Now, we are not even able to keep to that. We are not even able to repay at the due time. So you can imagine when you can have that leeway of 15%, it's more or less that the legislature is now looking at ways and means as a means of funding the budget. Go back and see the budgets of Nigeria from independence till date. I've never come across anywhere where ways and means is written into the budget as a source of funding the deficit.
Two issues I'd like to raise with you, one in relation to this and another point that you made earlier. But let me follow up with what a lot of Nigerians expect to happen tomorrow. That's the inauguration of the 10th Assembly. And, you know, with this talk about interference and all, I wonder what you make of it. Because the APC, the president, they've not hidden their choice for who they want to lead the National Assembly, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. We've seen some people falling into line, particularly at the House of Reps. Well, for the Senate, it looks like it's going to be up until the last minute. How do you expect this process to go? Yes, we can talk about what preceded it, but we have just a day to go. Do you expect voting to be open? Should it be secret? How do you expect the lawmakers to carry the trust, the responsibility which Nigerians have placed in them, sending them into those hallowed chambers?
I expect them to vote according to their conscience. It should be by secret ballot in accordance with the trust that Nigerians have bestowed on them. And there is a challenge that we've been running away from. Look at even the person who is being recommended as to lead the Senate, with all the baggage that the EFCC is still going after the person. And then you have the ruling party making that recommendation and saying this is our candidate. And what does that portend back to the question of the rule of law? Once you become the Senate president, yes, you don't have immunity, but if you are the choice of the party, I don't see the EFCC or the anti-corruption agency still going after that case. And that sends a very, very dangerous signal to our democracy, to the rule of law, to the fact that punishment must follow a crime. So we can't continue like this. The senators, the distinguished reps, should understand that history beckons, that at the end of the day, Nigerians will look at each and every one of them and decide to hold them accountable and write their names either in the good part of history or in the bad part of it. Nobody should be coerced. Nobody should be intimidated, because at the end of the day, every man, every woman has got a right to decide his own destiny. Even from the religious angle, when the time you leave this world, when you go and meet your creator, if you believe in God, whether you believe in him or not, you are not going to plead. You are not going to be hard to say, A or B told me to do wrong. When you've already been given a conscience of your own, when you already have the Spirit of God to make a decision and for which you will be accountable. So nobody, I repeat, nobody should plead that another told him to put his hand in fire as the reason for trying to put his own hand in fire or plunging the hands of Nigerians into fire. It is no defense.
You know, Mr. Onyekpere, some members-elect themselves would argue that, you know, there's nothing out of place that the party has done, that, you know, in line with international parliamentary practice, in line with best practice globally, that the party nominates, you know, their choice of candidates into key positions of parliament, and that in fact, you know, those who are positioning themselves, you know, with aspirations countering the party's position are doing so just for self-interest. So what really do you think, you know, about this sides of the coin, sides of the argument, which should trump the other, you know, the independence of parliament, or really what parliamentarians themselves argue should be, you know, the best practice, that is, that the party nominates going from the strength of having won the elections?
I am minded to say that the political party should have a say, but not an overwhelming say. And what it means is that if you have 50 members or 60 elected from your party and you're in the majority, you should look at the background, antecedents of each of those members that are representing your party. And from their background and from what they've done in the past, because many of them have held public office, then you select the cream de la cream, the best of the best, in the national interest. You cannot always be bringing out your third 11 in a football match that you are going to play against the Ronaldos and the Messis in their prime. And you bring out a third 11. That means you are preparing, you've already made up your mind that you are going to collect goals, that you may lose by as much as 7-8-0. So in essence, the legislature should be independent. The political party should also have a role, but they need to come together by consensus and find the best in the national interest, which is beyond both the political party and the legislature. We are discussing the interest of Nigeria. We are discussing the persons who can make the best laws, who can exercise oversight. You remember, the relationship between the executive and the legislature is some form of romance. Yes, there's love, there's hate, right. You know. It's just like there's always this constitutionally provided not always being on the same page, because if they start operating on the same page, it's like a conspiracy against the people. So yes, there'll be love, there'll be hate. One person must try to call the other best party to order. And that's why I'm saying political party will play a role, the legislators will then play a role, but every role must be in the bigger picture of the national interest.
Well, Mr. Onyekpere, I'm reading a story now, a headline that says APC senators reject suspension of CBN governor and accuses president of applying double standards. But when you look closely at the date, you realize this was in February 2014. APC senators at that time were condemning the suspension of then CBN governor, if you recall that story very well, the former emir now. And I see the statement signed by Senator Babafemi Ojudu, of course, a member of the party. And you say that this hasn't been done right. A lot of people have said that. So who should be speaking or taking action if, according, by the way, that statement quotes Section 11, sub 12 of the CBN Act, essentially the same thing a lot of people have said. So who should be taking this up?
Well, that is the duty of the legislature. I mean, the outgone legislature should have done something. Even the new one that is going to be inaugurated should also try to call the president to order. You see, that's what I was saying. The concept of the rule of law, the concept of democracy is as constant as the Northern Star. The rules don't change because the man from your constituency or who you favor or who you are his loyalist has come to power. If what Jonathan did in 2014 was wrong, what Tinubu is doing today is also wrong. But if he has committed any offense, please do investigate him. Bring him to trial before a court of competent jurisdiction. Apply the rules of the criminal law and evidence. If he's convicted, so be it. But if you cannot sustain a charge, these ideas of media trial, accusations and counter-accusations, I also expect that the DSS should, if there is anything bordering on economic crime, hand him over to either the EFCC or the ICPC or the police. So the law has not changed. It still remains what it is. So whether it was APC then condemning or PDP today saying something, nothing has changed. Nigerians still demand that the rule of law should be followed. That's simple.
Well, we have to thank you very much, Mr. Onyekere, for being on this program today. I mean, several other questions trail that comment that he just made, that if he is to be investigated while in office, is that even according to the law? But, you know, we'll take that on some other time. We have to thank you very much at this time. Eze Onyekere is a lawyer and lead director, Center for Social Justice. Thank you so much for your time and your perspectives today.
Thank you.
All right. So we're back right after now to take on that issue of the 10th National Assembly. Right back after now.
Hi, I'm Pato Rankin, and they don't call me World Best for no reason. I only deal with the best, be it auto or business. 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to World Class Insurance Services. We are Anchor Insurance, where insurance truly works.
The Duchess International Hospital caters to every aspect of the family's health needs. A one-stop shop for maternity and child health services, emergency medicine and critical care, medical and surgical subspecialties, dental and eye care, and a range of other subspecialties and services, all available at a single location right here in the heart of Ikeja. And it really doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket using your HMO or private insurance. We focus completely on providing that world-class affordable healthcare for all the family at all times.
Of power, a new chapter unfolds. The 10th National Assembly beckons, and at its helm, a leader of unwavering resolve and unyielding dedication, Senator Godswill Akpabio, a beacon of hope for a brighter Nigeria. Senator Akpabio's journey has been one of fearless leadership and steadfast commitment. From commissioner to governor, from senator to minister, his uncommon transformation has reverberated across the nation, earning him the nickname Uncommon. Beyond his remarkable accomplishments, Senator Akpabio's heart beats for the unity of our great nation. Today, as he aspires to be the Senate's president of the 10th Senate, Senator Akpabio's unyielding passion for an egalitarian Nigeria fuels his vision for a united nation, where every citizen's voice is heard and respected. Support Senator Godswill Akpabio for the Senate President of the 10th Senate and join the movement for a united Nigeria, where our shared aspirations become our collective reality.
Nigeria, a nation at a crossroads of greatness. On June 12, 2023, join Channels Television on Democracy Day as we usher you into the hallways of national discourse at a post-election period needing national reconciliation in the face of fractured political expectations, a challenged economy, fuel subsidy removal, and a new ruling class.
The first subsidy is gone.
And what's in store for Nigerians?
The
reality is the market will determine what the real price of our debt is.
The taxes that hurt any economy most is the taxes on investors.
Join your multiple award-winning TV station as erudite minds discuss the issues on Democracy Day, June 12, 2023, exclusively on Channels Television, a network built on trust.
The 10th National Assembly to be inaugurated on the 13th of June. That's what we're focusing on right now. Less than 24 hours to go, and there will be lots of activities just right there at the National Assembly. So let's get some more insight into this. It's been a long, drawn journey, I must tell you. Just a few weeks, but it feels like a long time. We're joined by Mr. Adamu Garba, former Deputy Director, Media, Tinubu Shetima Grassroots Independent Campaign. He joins us live from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. Garba, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Kayode and the team. Thank you for having me.
I know, today is Democracy Day. There's been the speech by the president, lots of reactions, but there's another day, which is a main day, maybe for lawmakers, it's their own Democracy Day anyway, which is tomorrow. And you've been following this trend. You're right in the middle of it. You've reported on it. I saw a tweet you put out just some hours ago about a certain meeting that happened and how some senators have said they will support, the anointed candidate of your party. But it's been said, Mr. Garba, that if the election were to be a secret ballot, then the anointed candidates of your party would not make it. But if it were to be open, a lot of people would just want to save face and vote for the anointed candidate, which means that maybe the preferred candidate of your party is not really preferred at the National Assembly, particularly the Senate.
You see, Kayode, usually in a situation like this, there are always speculations about support of a particular candidate, especially in a context of democracy, which is actually part of the beauty of democracy. You have option A and option B, and all of them are contesting for the same position. We should expect that the opposition will always try to plant a story that will be to their advantage. But of course, it is wrong. As you said, I posted in a tweet, I was actually even in that dinner where the senators were there. Personally, I counted about 62 senators endorsing distinguished Senator Godswill Akpabio and distinguished Senator Barrow Jibrin for the president of the Senate and the deputy. And again, cumulatively, we have about 75, because some of them have registered the reasons why they are not around, they have not been in Abuja. And some even very critically say that they just don't want to show face because they have friends in the other camp. So the whole thing, again, is that if you look at it, we have a comprehensive support from the Senate about the presidency, the contest of Senator Akpabio. Why? Because there is this high trust in the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Tinubu. And you can see just recently from the Democratic Day speech, you just mentioned that, he once again reiterated the fact that he has entered into social democratic contract with Nigerians, and that he embodies the struggle to build the democracy we have today, and that he has demonstrated significant preparedness, readiness, competency, and ability to drive Nigeria from where it is today to where we all imagine it to be, that will benefit all Nigerians in just the past 12 days. Right. So everybody is queuing behind the party's choice and the president's choice. The president did not just choose Akpabio just by sheer pointing finger. And this man, Akpabio, was a commissioner. After serving in a bar for 30 years, he became the commissioner in his state, became a governor, became a senator, became a minister, and now again aspiring for the Senate president after returning as a senator.
Well, you should also add,
Mr. somebody having this kind of capacity over time, built up of responsibility, and himself a name of an uncommon transformation governor in Akwa Ibom State, and then we now come back and say that maybe he's just anointed, but some people don't want to follow him. I think it's just a story that is planted by the opposition, which is not gaining ground.
So speak to this then. I mean, you forgot to add that he also stepped down for the president at that convention, and a lot of people say that's what was also factored in. But so why then, if the party is so confident, if this is, as you claim, being planted by the opposition and all of that, why is your party then, whipping people who don't seem to be supporting the preferred candidate? Why is it whipping them into line? Why are you, and when I say you, your party, then saying you must do this? Why not allow everybody to choose freely if you think that, well, this preferred candidate is indeed capable and enjoys, the support of members of the National Assembly?
No. I think if there's anything called whipping, I think it could be a misconception. The party, APC, is one of the most collaborative, most consultative party we have so far in Nigeria. Everything that happens within the party is consultative. Most of these senators are being asked to look into the future that we are trying to build that will benefit Nigerians, to look at the program of action, the promise of delivery of Tinubu administration in the Renewed Hope manifestos, and how it should be driven. And we should also look at the trust matrix that you have been discussing here since morning. That is not so much in Nigeria, and there is need for us to renew the hope of Nigerians by injecting trust into delivery of our services, that Nigerians will continue to trust us. And you can hear again from the president's speech that he highlighted very clearly that painfully Nigerians should be patient more again and sacrifice more so that the government can pay them in infrastructure, healthcare, education, and excellent service delivery that will benefit every Nigerian.
Mr. Demo.
So if we reach a point at this stage where we are seeking the trust of Nigerians, it is important for us to have a National Assembly that is complementing the effort of the executive,
Mr. Demo,
that is going to work with the executive based on mutual obligations and reciprocal commitment, that will help in driving this agenda so that we can continue to deliver what we promise Nigerians.
Mr. Demo, I doubt that you're addressing the question. What my colleague Kaide seeks to know is why the party is trying to whip into line those lawmakers elects that are not supporting the party's choice. And, if we must address that wholly, we recall the senator who appeared on our sister program yesterday saying that he was, in fact, called by a friend on his way to our studios in Abuja and told not to go but to appear via Zoom, that senators who are not supporting the party's choice are being targeted. So why is the party targeting those who are not supporting, members-elect who are not supporting their own choice for the office of Senate President and Speaker?
I think I have addressed that question. I told you that this could be a story that is being planted by the opposition senators, and it's usually expected because some people are not supporting the choice of the party. So it is free that they must exercise what they feel they can, and to advance a cause of maybe a story that will show as if they are being whipped in line. But we can see what is evident. The president
have evidence?
All the senators elect,
Mr.
regardless of the party, and discuss with them about his program of action and the need for them to continue to support the government. I don't see the president carrying maybe a whip to try to tell them you must vote for my candidate or I'm going to deal with you. This is just a story.
Mr. Damu, yes. Do you have evidence that the story is being planted? That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, recall that the president had addressed traditional rulers and told them to appeal to members-elect who are vying for key positions to manage their ambitions.
It is fantastic. The president is trying to say, let us have order. Let us have rancor-free National Assembly. Let us have smooth takeoff of this government that Nigerians are yearning for. We do not want to have a situation whereby we have activist-driven National Assembly. This is the country that has been practicing democracy since 1999. We have built up a history of service, a history of commitment, that we need a mutual relationship between the executive and the legislative so that we can continue to drive the government agenda. It's not yet time for us to be having a kind of an activist National Assembly. It's time for us to have a complementary National Assembly. And what the president is saying is simple. Come together, let's work together, let's build this country. Let us not disappoint Nigerians. Let us not repeat the experience of 2015 and 2019, where even to pass a budget became a very difficult challenge to the government. That's what the president is saying. And the president chose the most competent of the senators. Senator Akpabio and Senator Barrow are some of the best you can get.
Well, Mr. Adamu, just a second. There are a number of people who will have their own issues. They will have their opinions as far as they are concerned about who is the most competent or not. But that's for the senators to decide, or the members of the House of Representatives to select. But, you know, one of the issues for a number of people would be, as you said, the APC is, been on since like 2014 or thereabout. And there are those who would wonder, why at this time, after 8 years in government, we still have this kind of rancor, such that the interests are still so strong. The president of the national leadership of the party, including the presidential candidate and president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on the part of your party, has been unable, so to speak, to carry everybody along, as you say, in politics, in such a way that everyone would say, okay, if that's the way the party is going, then that's the way the party should go, and every one of us should just line up. There are those who would question the communication of this ideal of your party to the contestants, to the members of your party who are in the National Assembly. Would you say that that's an issue, or is just one of those things that happens in politics?
Frankly speaking, all the things you said are those things that usually happen in politics, including even the president choices, and of course, or I can say the party choice. The party's choice is in line with the agenda that the government is trying to push for the benefit of Nigerians, and the party is expected to grandfather stewardship in how we can have a rancor-free legislation that can work in tandem with the executive to deliver the promises of Nigeria. So a situation whereby we have this kind of confusion in the Senate, and then we have some tendencies of rebellion against the executive programs, we may not really get it right. And we should also look at the competencies and the capacities, as I mentioned. It goes back
to that same question, Mr. Adamu. Just 1 second, if you can hear me. It goes back to that issue of whether or not there's, just a second, it goes back to that issue of whether or not the carry-along has been quite significant or significant enough to sway these agitations. But then also speak to the fact that the president spoke with traditional rulers, one way or the other, directly or indirectly, asking them to weigh in on the leadership of the National Assembly. How far-reaching do you think that can go in the scheme of things?
I think, to the best of my knowledge, everybody was carried along, and I was part of the stability group as part of the media operations and coordination within the campaign, and we have moved to many places. We were in Lagos, we were in different governors' houses, we were in different senators' houses, including those that don't agree with our choice of candidate, Akpabio and Barrow. We were also there. We visited them. Consultation was done extensively to traditional rulers, to different interest groups and major stakeholders of the party about this choice. So I don't understand where the issue of consultation is coming from. And the president's appeal is not altogether disconnected from his grand plan for Nigeria. This is for the first time we are having a president that embodies the true substance of democracy. And that is why you see, despite all the challenges we have in this country, Nigeria has now cooled down. Everybody is bringing a lot of trust to the president. And the president said, no, this is not the end of the game. We need more. We need a better National Assembly to work with. We need the better leaders, especially the presiding officers of the National Assembly, to work with me so that we can drive this agenda. We are not saying that we are going to dictate to them what they should do, because there is already several laws that have been passed, several acts that have become law with over the period of 24 years, that you don't expect any activism to play. There are institutional framework that guides the process of relationship between the executives and the legislation. So it's not the time where we need to be, beating the kind of table and be saying we don't agree in the National Assembly. It is time for us to work together. So the president is appealing to traditional rulers. This is the time for us to build Nigeria. Let's work together. Let's come together. Let's do this for Nigerians. Let us put our personal interests aside and look at the larger interests of ordinary Nigerians that are looking for us for leadership, that are looking for us for direction, that are looking for us for delivery. We shouldn't be, you should go back to your constituents and see how you can appeal to your senators and also senators-elect to come together with us so that we can deliver better service to Nigerians. And this is a perfectly in line with the program of the president based on renewable motivation. So I don't think it's a bad thing in democracy. I think it's a very good thing.
Right, and just to buttress the point, we had invited someone in support of another candidate who clearly said, well, I don't think I can come anymore because of those issues we had raised with you. And also, I hear that a lot of people in the YPP still have a grouse with you for abandoning them after raising their hopes or renewing their hopes and going back to the APC. But I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Adamu Garba, former Deputy Director of Media, Tinubu Shetima Grassroots Independent Campaign. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you, Kayode. Thank you for having me.
All right. So lots of mails have come in, really. And I see a lot of people telling us where they were on June 12. Chukwuji Augustine saying, I was still in my mom's womb. Just a month plus.
I saw that coming.
I saw this one from Mike Paul saying, it was my final year in the university. I remember I came out to vote for MKO on the election day and was basking in victory until the shock. That's Michael Isoa. Lots of mails, really. Thank you so much for sending them. So let's get into more of them.
Oh, yes. And this is our concluding moments on the program here this morning. Your tweet, we have just 3 of them to look at, but a good number of them you will be able to see on our Twitter handle, Sunrise Daily Now. This one is from Honorable Ademola Alade, who says, no one is saying Senator Akpabio is not qualified to be the Senate President, and the APC has suggested him to lead the Senate. But members of the National Assembly should not be coerced to vote a particular candidate, but be allowed to freely choose their leaders.
More scrutiny on that candidacy, but hey, we must wrap up the program. This one is coming from Oshinowo Kinsley, and he says, the suspension of the CBN governor is in order. Public fund was wasted. Nigerians were put through untold hardship and businesses crumbled. He should be investigated, and if found guilty, he should face the music. And
the question will be, is it in order with the law, in order with the sentiments of people, in order with what, Oshinowo Kingsley? Let's do a rider tomorrow, right? And HKSA has this one. I earnestly hope that we will not continue with the arbitrary jungle-style arrest of citizens by the SSS in this new dispensation. I really hope that the SSS is not acting on its own in the arrest of the CBN governor.
Well, that's much of the program we can take today. Thank you so much for the privilege of being a part of your morning. This Democracy Day. I'd like you, if you can, to renew your commitment to Nigeria. Google the National Pledge. Read it to yourself. Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful rest of your day.
I hear it's a really tough question for some people to recite the pledge. But hey, we have a full package for you right here on Channels Television. So stay with us. We're here with you all day. I'm Kayode Pinkele.
And whether you recite the pledge or not, remember that democracy allows for expression, and don't invalidate the expression or the position of anyone. Thank you for letting us being a part of your morning. I am Bukola Koka.
of people